Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Samantha B. Codd. I'm the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. Tonight, I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. We're here representing as well teachers and speaking about public education systems that are supporting students from across Treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 territories in the Métis homelands. I want to add as well, because while we're here to discuss public education, the work that we're doing needs to support the work we do to support reconciliation is not done in isolation. So I look forward to hearing commitments to meaningful action embedded through our discussion tonight. This forum is being recorded and it will be available to the public in the coming days on the STF's YouTube channel. But first, a bit about why we're here tonight. It's only been a couple of days since the writ was dropped, but we know that education is a key issue, both in the provincial election that's happening October 28th and in local elections where we'll vote for trustees happening on November 13th. Truly, this is your opportunity to demand better from our elected officials on behalf of students who are the future of this province. The STF is a nonpartisan organization, so we will not be endorsing any single party or candidate. I stated this a few weeks ago when we launched our platform document and our election campaign, Vote for Public Education. As an organization, we operate and are governed under the Teachers Federation Act. Within that piece of legislation, we work to advance the interests of teachers and advocate on behalf of the collective for excellence in public education, something that we've been doing for nearly a century. With that in mind, we do encourage people to take an active role in the democratic process, to learn more about candidates or parties, and to make an informed decision based on those facts in the context of public education. I mentioned our election campaign a couple of minutes ago. I encourage you to visit the Federation's website for our platform document and other materials. While planning this event, we sent invites to the 7 registered political parties with Elections Canada. 6 candidates will be joining us here tonight. They are, in alphabetical order, Valerie Brooks from the Saskatchewan Green Party, Rose Buscholl, leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Saskatchewan, Jeremy Cockrill, Saskatchewan Party. Jeremy also served as the Education Minister since August 2023. Matt Love with the Saskatchewan NDP, and Matt has served as Education Critic while in opposition. Jahangir Valiani, the Saskatchewan Progress Party, and Zajac, leader of the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan. Thank you so much to our candidates for joining us here tonight to talk about public education. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator this evening, Jennifer Connell. She is a podcast host and producer in Saskatoon at Cascade Communications. You may also remember Jennifer from her years as a television and radio reporter in Saskatchewan. Her role tonight will be to moderate our invited guests, keeping them on time and interjecting here and there to get clarifications from our guests. So welcome to our STF election forum, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Samantha. And thank you so much to the candidates for being here and for all the teachers, student teachers, the retired teachers, for everyone who is here with us. Public education is pretty dear to my heart. I happen to be the daughter of a couple of teachers. I happen to have 3 kids going to school right now. So yeah, this is front and center for so many of us. Few housekeeping details. Just wanted to let you know that we have drawn names from a hat to decide, of our 6 candidates who are here sharing their time with us this evening, who speaks when and how long do they go. All right. Almost the entire night, each candidate gets about 2 minutes to answer the question. The real tricky part is that we have the order of rotation, and I'll be helping you remember what it is, but we'll be starting off with Jeremy Cockrill. We'll then hear from Jahangir Valiani, then from Valerie Brooks, then from Rose Buscholl, then Matt Love, and then from Zajac. On our second question, we'll start with Jahangir, and Jeremy will go to the bottom of the rotation and we'll sort of move through. I know it's a little bit like you're in elementary school and you're in a line of friends and you're all taking turns. That's the idea. We're also going to be counting on each candidate, although you have 2 minutes to answer just about every question. We'll give you a minute for a closing statement. You don't have to speak the whole time. If you have run out of things to say, it's kind of nice to allow ourselves just a little extra time. There may be occasions where I have to break in and say, okay, you're losing me here. Can you help me understand what you mean? That said, I'm really looking forward to tonight. So yeah, with that all put together, I think we can probably just begin with our opening statements. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to talk to us about what they see as really important, maybe as the reasons that they came here tonight. And yeah, we'll be starting with Jeremy Cockrill from the Saskatchewan Party. So go ahead, Jeremy. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation and my fellow candidates for being here tonight. Over the last year, I've had the opportunity to serve as the Minister of Education in this province, and I've had the opportunity to hear directly from teachers as we work through a variety of issues and challenges facing education here in the province. I can tell you the best part of my job has been visiting schools where I've seen firsthand how dedicated Saskatchewan educators are to providing the best possible education for our children and grandchildren. With a growing province, we know there are challenges, and I hope that I have the opportunity to work with the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation and its members to continue improving public education in our great province. The Saskatchewan Party is ready to meet those challenges, including making record investments into education. Our most recent budget includes the largest ever increase to school operating funding in Saskatchewan history. Operating funding for school divisions will grow to $2.2 billion this year, an increase of $180 million year over year, or almost 9%. This budget includes more than $356 million in classroom supports, including funding to address classroom size and complexity. There's $35 million to support enrollment growth for this school year that we're currently in, and $30 million to fund operational pressures such as salaries for non-teaching positions, bus drivers, and educational assistants. There's also $2.5 million for the Teacher Innovation and Support Fund pilot to provide better student experiences thanks to teacher-led projects. And there's also $2.4 million for our specialized support classroom pilot happening in Regina, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, and North Battleford. We're also investing in school capital, nearly 30 ongoing school capital projects going on right around the province. So thank you again for having me tonight, and I look forward to the discussion we're going to have.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. All right, we'll be moving on to our next candidate, Jahangir Valiani. It is your turn. 2 minutes. Tell us a little bit about how you see public education. This is your opening statement.
Thank you so much. Good evening, and thank you, Jennifer, and the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation for hosting this forum and for the invitation. In my opening statement, I want to talk about what the philosophy of the Saskatchewan Progressive Party is, and which is my philosophy too, on education. One sentence: the provision of high quality, fully funded public education is probably one of the most important responsibilities of the provincial government. Investments in public education don't only reap financial benefits beyond their costs through the generation of a more productive workforce. Public education is vital for the development of a thoughtful and informed citizenry. So to that end, our public education system and our teachers need to be supported, and the resources should be provided to the public education system that meet the importance of the work you do. Fundamentally, the math for public education should not be seen as an expense, but an investment. The more that we put towards it to ensure that every child has access to high quality education, the stronger our province will be. I'm just going to conclude with a little note. My sons came home today, and there was a school lockdown drill, and pardon me, nothing that I've ever had to deal with when I was young. And I said, "How do you feel?" And they said, "No, I'm okay. Our teacher looked after us." So for everybody watching and all you do in creating lesson plans and being creative with your thoughts, you deserve our gratitude and a government that has your back.
Thank you so much for that, Jahangir. That is Jahangir Valiani with the Progress Party. All right, moving on to our third candidate for her opening statement. Let's go to Valerie Brooks.
Hello, good evening to everyone joining and our moderator, fellow panelists. I'm coming to you from Treaty 4 territory near Yorkton. First of all, I'm not Naomi Hunter, leader of the Saskatchewan Green Party as advertised, but I was her former deputy leader for a short period of time, and More importantly, I'm a professional educator and proud STF member. So before I say anything else, I would like to thank the STF bargaining team and the leadership of Samantha for the work they've been doing for us at the bargaining table and now during binding arbitration. So I, for one, have appreciated all that they have done for the profession, for students, and for the future of our province. So my journey as an educator started young with coaching jobs and mentoring youth. I always knew I'd be a great teacher, but what I didn't know is that I would be taking a step back from the profession after 20 years due to stress and the feeling that I just couldn't find the same passion and satisfaction I once did with it. So taking a step back, however, has allowed me to follow my other passions, and that's why I'm here tonight. As a candidate for the Sask Green Party in the Yorkton riding this election, I feel I have much to offer and want voters, to consider how electing MLAs from a third party, such as the Green Party, could help improve the state of education in this province. Instead of a two-party system that flip-flops back and forth between the traditional left-right ideologies, I would like you to consider how a third party could help bring balance and, more importantly, another voice to the table. So diversity is good. It's something we should be striving for in all aspects of our society. We know as teachers that embracing the diversity in our classrooms makes our lessons stronger and our students more confident. Why then don't we seek that same thing in our legislature? So one of the most important values I hold and share with the Saskatchewan Green Party is promoting a participatory democracy with engaged citizens and a collaborative and proportionally representative governing body.
Valerie, we'll have to end you there. Yeah, that's 2 minutes, but thank you. I think you've outlined it beautifully. We'll come back to you on our next question, but I now have to turn the mic over to Matt Love from the NDP. Go ahead, Matt.
I think maybe Rose is supposed to be next, but I can go now if you like.
I'm sorry. Yes. Well, let's actually stick to our order. I made up this order. Let's stick with it. Rose, if we could get you back, Rose Buscholl. She is with the Progressive Conservative Party of Saskatchewan. And Rose, I made a mistake. You go ahead. This is your turn.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Matt. And thank you to the STF for having this forum tonight. I think this is very important. Public education is a hot topic. I've had 3 kids go through the public education system, starting in the 90s, working all the way up to the last one in 2022. And now I have 2 grandsons in there. So public education to me is very important. I am the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Saskatchewan. So this is something I've been very vocal on. I fully believe that when it comes to public education, that public funds belong to public education. They don't belong to private schools. We need to keep a strong public education system in place. This is where our future leaders are learning right now, whether they are leaders in business, leaders in politics, hospitals. This is where they're coming from right now. And if we don't have that strong education system, we don't have much of a future. I have seen since the 90s, since about 95 onwards, the public education system constantly going downhill, with the biggest hit happening when there was a big budget slash in 2017, which we've never fully recovered from. And it's time that we have strong voices in place in the legislature to make sure that we can continue with a very strong public education system and stop ending these cuts and bring it back to what it used to be. We have the opportunity to be the envy in this province. And I think maybe it's time we start looking forward to be that again.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Rose. So that's Rose Buscholl from the Progressive Conservative Party. Now, Matt Love from the NDP.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks to the Federation for hosting this important discussion here this evening. Many of you know that I'm also a teacher and that I spent about 10 years teaching in Saskatoon public schools, most of that teaching grade 9 right here in Saskatoon Eastview at Aidan Bowman Collegiate. Now, I love teaching and I miss the job, I really do. And I wasn't looking for a career change, but 5 years ago, I could clearly see the impact of Sask Party cuts in my school. In the classrooms next to mine, we lost our EAL teacher, we had a librarian cut, our PAA program was cut, and I had a colleague teaching math to 45 students at a time. And I also saw the needs of our students were increasing. We had mental health care needs that were going unmet. We had many students new to Canada, new to the English language, who were not having their needs met, as well as students who needed access to other professionals that were waiting far too long to see those folks. None of the supports that those students needed were there. And that was 4 years ago. I understand the last 4 years, things have gotten drastically worse. Now, despite election year promises and committees and pilot projects, the Sask Party has failed miserably to address the challenges of class size and complexity. After 17 years in government, they have dragged our province to last place in education. Your classrooms are more crowded and more complex than they've ever been. And instead of investing in your classrooms, this government used your tax dollars to take out billboards to run down teachers. Now, I want to close by saying that Saskatchewan New Democrats and our leader, Carla Beck, will fix what the Sask Party has broken. We'll reverse Scott Moe's cuts to the classroom, and we'll work with teachers to ensure that we increase the level of quality of education in Saskatchewan. When we put up billboards in this province, it will be to say thank you to our teachers. Thanks to my fellow teachers for being here this evening.
Right to time. Thank you so much, Matt. And from the Buffalo Party, Philip Zajac, it's your turn. All right, Philip, looking for you. Philip, are you with us and online? It's your turn to make an opening statement.
Okay, I was muted. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I want to thank the STF for hosting this. I know this takes time away from your families, and that's important time to be at home. The Buffalo Party thinks that education and healthcare need to be the two priorities that the next government focuses on. We understand that the Sask Party has done a travesty to the education system over the past 10 years plus of government. We will invest heavily in education. And the thing that's important is to have a plan. The Buffalo Party believes the government should be run like a business. And in that effect, you should have a business plan, not just for next year or the next 4 years, but a plan for the next 100 years. You need to base these numbers on population growth, potential students that are going to come to a new area. If you know that you're going to have large amounts of students coming to a new area, you have to have the school ready to be built before that happens. So strategic planning is important for the future for the kids of this province. I've been a high school football coach for 14 years. I know the work that teachers do is extensive. The time they put in after hours of school is important too. And I'm proud to say that Buffalo will make education a priority. We will cut the Diefenbaker water project and invest that $1 billion in healthcare and education.
Thank you very much, Philip. That is Philip Zajac. He's with the Buffalo Party. And this brings us to the questions that we've been trying to put together, questions that all of you will have a chance to answer. Again, we're going to limit our answers to about 2 minutes each. I will jump in if I feel like I need clarification or if I need to better understand something. But we'll start with restoring and maintaining per student funding. This is something that a number of you have touched on even in the opening statements, and we've seen it in our schools. If you look at a study done very recently by the Fraser Institute, Saskatchewan has the highest per student funding in the country. If you look back at the year 2015-16, the thing is, then you have to adjust things for inflation, as all our budgets are. And then, okay, it's about $16,000 per student. That was based on budget day announcements. Well, now we're looking at per student funding of roughly $11,474 per student. So the question for each of you candidates is, if your party forms government or holds the balance in a minority legislature, will you restore and maintain per student funding at those 2015-16 levels at about $16,000 per student? Today, we will be starting this round of answers with Jahangir Valiani from the Progress Party.
Hi there. That is an important question. And for the Saskatchewan Progress Party, we firmly believe that funding for education needs to be restored on a real per capita basis. There's a variety of ways that can be done about this. And one of the ways is to restore the ability for local school divisions to set mill rates, so that way they can ensure that there's appropriate funding within their school divisions, and also ensuring that from the provincial government level, that there's a backstop, so there's a floor, so everybody has access to high quality education. I think we also need to think beyond this. I mean, the proper funding of public education is key to making life affordable for Saskatchewaners. And this can be things like the elimination of out-of-pocket fees for lunch supervision and even field trips. Educational experiences are education and should be covered in the provincial education budget. And even if you look at something like a school lunch and snack program for the elementary students, not only does Saskatchewan have a really high child poverty rate, which this will help, but if you think about it as a parent, how many hours you spend worrying about lunch and snacks for your children to make sure that they're packed in online, it's one of those little things that can make life easier and more affordable for everybody.
Thank you, Jahangir. That is Jahangir Valiani from the Progress Party. And the same question for each of you. If your party forms government or holds seat balance, will you restore and maintain per student funding at the levels that we saw back in 2015, 2016? So our next panelist will be Valerie Brooks from the Green Party.
Absolutely. The Green Party is committed to restoring the funding and even possibly making it better than it was in those years. One of the things I think we need to remember is if we don't invest in our kids, we don't invest in our future. And other panelists have said this already, but it's so important that education needs to be a really huge priority for any government. One of the ways that we would be able to fund this is eliminating the duplication of services and reduce administrative costs in government. In our budgeting, we found that we could probably save $600 million annually to be reinvested into public education just by doing those steps. We'd also look at phasing out funding for private schools over the next 5 years, and possibly, am I done? Oh, sorry, and possibly combining the two systems to have a more diverse and inclusive total province education system that could also eliminate duplicates and things like that. So those are some of the ideas that we have, and that's, I guess, all I have to say.
And on the question of would you restore funding, it's a yes.
Yes, absolutely, 100% and more.
All right, thank you very much for that, Valerie. All right, let's move to Rose Buscholl from the PCs.
I'm going to answer this in the simplest way I know, and that is absolutely. The funding per student has to be increased. If we do not increase that funding, we are going to continually see problems in our education system. We are going to continue to see problems within classroom size and complexity. We will continue to see shortages when it comes to special aids for students, such as psychologists, counselors. So we absolutely have to bring that funding up. So it's without a question, yes, this is something we are committed to do. And the PC Party of Saskatchewan would be a very strong voice into making sure that this happens.
Thank you, Rose. I'm going to keep moving to Matt Love from the NDP. Will you restore and maintain per student funding at those 2015-16 levels, Matt, if your party forms government?
So Jen, your question's a good one. It's a really important one, the way that you phrased it. In the last 10 years, the Saskatchewan Party has led us from first in the country in per student funding to dead last. When students return to school this year, they're entering school with the lowest per student funding in the country. And we still have Sask Party MLAs and candidates going around with the same old tired talking lines and patting themselves on the back for a job well done for worst in the country performance. The Saskatchewan NDP and our leader Carla Beck made an announcement this year on the first day of school that we will invest $2 billion into our publicly funded, publicly delivered education systems that will return funding to where it was at before Scott Moe became the premier. This is the kind of funding that we need to address the challenges of class size and complexity, and we can't do it alone. We need to ensure that teacher voice is included, that teachers are at the table. Our goal is to reverse the cuts that we've seen under Scott Moe and to go even a little bit further so that every child and every teacher has the support that they need to succeed at school.
Thank you, Matt. All right, I'm going to follow up with Philip Zajac from the Buffalo Party. If your party forms government or holds the balance of power in the legislature, will you commit to restoring and maintaining that per student funding at those 2015-16 levels?
The Buffalo Party faith in education is one of the backbones of what we believe in as citizens of the province. I think it's important that we understand the amount of time that teachers spend with our children every day. And can you really put a number on that as an acceptable level of funding for a child? So we would absolutely bring that dollar amount back and increase it. With our plan of reducing frivolous, small-time pet projects that the government is proposing right now, we will easily have those funds available to do that, because as we transfer the money from that's been designated for those projects, we can now put that into education. The other thing that the Buffalo Party said, that during the negotiations with STF and the government, the Buffalo Party would simply have paid the teachers a 20% salary raise immediately if we were in government. Forget about negotiating and fighting with each other. Just come to a table with common sense and act in good faith. Nothing gets solved when you try and pigeonhole people into different spots. The Buffalo Party will come to the table and listen. It doesn't matter who you are, but without communication, problems start to build, and it's just like a cancer. The Buffalo Party is willing to listen to you speak. We hear the words that you're bringing forward about the lack of funding per child, and we would fix it.
One quick question for you while I have you, Philip. Those frivolous or small-time pet projects, if you could summarize a couple of them in about 10 to 20 seconds, what would they be?
I'll just tell you the Diefenbaker irrigation program. It's $1 billion project that does not have federal approval yet. And this is a mantra that the current government likes to use. We will just do what we want, even though it's not approved. Just by that one project alone, we would be able to transfer half of the money that the NDP just talked about with just one project. The other thing too is we will never raise taxes to pay for this. We will find ways to trim the government, trim the frivolous spending that's going on, and make sure that the people of Saskatchewan are not paying any more taxes. That's a problem that we're all facing right now.
Okay, thanks for that, Philip. All right, we are putting the same question we've put you all to Jeremy Cockrill, our current Minister of Education. He is a candidate for the Saskatchewan Party. And Jeremy, if your party forms government, will you commit to restoring and maintaining that per student funding at those 2015-16 levels?
Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate the question. I mean, any decision on education funding has to fit within the fiscal balance of the province. And I just want to say, quickly on the Fraser Institute report, it's very important to read into the details of that report, because some provinces include different things in their per student number than are included in Saskatchewan's per student number. For example, capital projects, capital spending is included in some provinces' numbers. Childcare, I believe, is included in other provinces' numbers. So it's important to note, and even the author of the report notes this, that it's not always an apples to apples comparison, and that more money is not automatically the solution. That is actually the words of the author of the report. But it's important to note what we are seeing in this province is a growing province. So we're seeing more students come, and we've added significant operating dollars to school divisions. As I mentioned in my opening statement, $180 million more this year. And so we're going to continue looking at how we can add funds to education to make sure that teachers and students can be supported wherever they are in the province.
And I do want to clarify a little bit, just when we are talking about these numbers, Saskatchewan also happens to have a really young population. 23% of the people who live in Saskatchewan are 17 or under. They don't vote, but they do go to our schools. And when we are looking at the numbers, the Fraser Institute has adjusted them as much as they can to account population growth and inflation. Saskatchewan is still down at the bottom of the barrel compared to where we used to be under the Saskatchewan Party government, not even a decade ago. Will you commit to restoring that per student funding to where it was in 2015-16?
Well, Jennifer, we have to, every year through the budgeting process, we have to evaluate where the fiscal balance is and ensure that, the provincial government's responsible for delivering education and healthcare and social programs, delivering infrastructure projects around the province. And so all those things are important to all of us, right? And, certainly for folks on this call, education is absolutely important. but it has to fit within the larger framework of what we do as a province. It's important to note, Jennifer, too, if you look at what Statistics Canada has said now 2 years in a row, is that in this province, we spend more per capita on K-12 education than any other province. So that means your family, my family, more.
Per capita is not the measure we're looking at here. We're looking at per student. And so what I'm hearing is not a yes, but it's more of a qualified, there are many circumstances. Is that fair?
That's very fair, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll give you a break, Jeremy. Go grab a water. We are going to move on to our second round of questions at this point. And this is one that you probably will have heard of a lot through the spring. This is where we're trying to address class size and complexity. It's a tough issue for a number of schools. The divisions are all different. And the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation is calling for both class size and complexity to be addressed by restoring the ratios of students to teachers and other professionals. They want to set and report targets and wait times for professional supports and specialists. And while, yes, class size and complexity varies across this province, the needs of each community are different. So here's the question for you, candidates. If you're elected, do you commit to restoring resources by the year 2028, so by the end of sort of the next election cycle? And if so, how? How will you ensure that the resources are going directly to meet students' needs and that take the unique needs of each community into account? So it's kind of a long-barreled question, but in terms of this one, I just want to make sure that we're sticking with where we need to be. This one, Valerie Brooks from the Green Party will be our first to answer. And then we'll be taking on the rotation from there, which will be followed by Rose, Matt, Philip, Jeremy, and Jahangir. So the floor is yours. Go ahead, Valerie.
I'm not sure I remember that complex question, but I do have, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, how do you ensure that the resources get to each student?
Yeah, and it is such a tricky one. So I've worked as a teacher and a school administrator in my career in various types of schools. And it is such a difficult question. So, for example, you probably can have, 25 students in a grade 10 class and, be okay. But if you have 25 students in a kindergarten class, you are swamped, you're underwater, right? So there are these issues. The Sask Green Party would like to see a cap of 20 kids in each classroom, but I understand from personal experience that, like you said, the needs are different in every school, every community, every grade, even, from K to 12. So I can attest to how difficult this is as a teacher and that it needs to change. And we would definitely, as Sask Greens, are definitely committed to making this change. But I think the way to do it is by consulting with teachers every step of the way in terms of what's needed. I know for a fact that our special support teachers, speech paths, psychologists, things like that are just totally lacking, which makes it harder for teachers to do their jobs. So it is such a difficult question, but we would be definitely committed to solving the problem by working with everyone to do that. And I'll just say that.
Thank you, Valerie. Yeah, it is a complex question. I'm just going to read it back so that we've all sort of we're on the same page with it. Rose, you're going to be up next. But the idea is we used to have ratios, mandated ratios of students to teachers and other professionals. What about setting and reporting targets and wait times if a student needs to see a speech therapist, if a student needs to see a counselor? And we understand class size and complexity varies, but how do you make sure that the money doesn't just sort of drift off into general revenues or into other departments or projects? How do you ensure that the money we have allocated for students goes directly to meeting their needs and takes the unique needs of each community into account? All right, I'm going to pass the floor on to you, Rose. Here's your 2 minutes.
Well, first off, thank you for the question. And it is a complicated question, and the answers to it is not very simple. You're talking about in ratio. Well, if this was a daycare, the education system would be shut down. The education system is so far out of ratio compared to for student teacher or support worker. It's just unbelievable. How would we make sure it gets to the student or to the school? Is we would start listening to the teachers, we would start listening to the schools, and we would start addressing what exactly do you need? So we can ensure that that school gets everything they need. And it's going to vary from school to school. It's not going to be the same across the board. What a small school in, say, rural Saskatchewan compared to a city school, the needs are going to be different. But when you're dealing with one psychologist for about every 3,000, I think it's like 2,900 students, that's crazy. That puts that wait time over 2 years. Well, by the time some of them actually get to see that psychologist, they're now out of school. And to me, it just seems really insane that this is going on, because these services were in place beforehand. These services were there to help students and teachers and schools function. These services were existing until 2017, when all of a sudden we saw a lot of support staff and EAs lose their jobs because of a problem that this current government created. And the thing is, they don't even want to admit responsibility, that they're the ones at fault for doing it. So yes, would we make sure it gets to the schools? Yes, but we would have to make sure we listen, and it's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Rose. That is Rose Buscholl from the Progressive Conservative Party, and she was bang on with that statistic. We do have one psychologist per 2,995 students. So yeah, your math is mathing. Thank you for that, Rose. We're going to put the same question to Matt Love from the NDP in terms of addressing class size and complexity. Do we reinstate the ratios? Mandatory reporting on how long kids are waiting? The floor is yours, Matt Love.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. I mean, this question is really about how do we go about solving these problems that teachers have been very vocal and very effective at bringing to the public, which is class size and complexity. Now, I want to mention that the funding I spoke about before, that's our commitment to the people and the students and the teachers of Saskatchewan, that we're serious about solving this problem, but we can't do it alone. We need to ensure that for the right supports to get into place, we need to ensure that teacher voice is also at the table. Teachers know their schools well, they know what's effective in the classrooms, and we need to ensure that teacher voice is included in this. I also want to note that there's an important role for local school divisions. Our local school divisions in Saskatchewan talk about a system that is cut to the bone. They talk about a system that everything has been cut but the bare essentials. And for year after year after year, when it comes time for them to do their budgets, they're making cuts. Our commitment is to reverse that trend. We can't do it all in the first year, but to reverse that trend so that local divisions can work alongside in good partnership, including teacher voice and accountability to teachers of how those funds are spent, to ensure that the right supports are getting to the right place to be effective. Now, we've talked about this trajectory of going from first in the country to dead last in terms of per student funding. You have my word that an NDP government will restore that funding, that will work to repair that relationship between teachers and government, so teachers can do really what they got into the profession to do, which is to serve the children and youth and the communities that they're there to serve. Thanks.
And Matt, I do want to follow up on one point, as you mentioned local boards, and we actually heard one candidate earlier committing to bringing back local taxation power, setting their own mill rates. How do you ensure that the money that your party is promising to spend, how do you ensure that gets to the students? Would you reinstate local powers for mill rates?
Well, we have to remember when that local power of taxation was taken away by the Sask party, it came with a promise. There was a promise that the government, the Sask party government, would provide adequate funding so that they didn't have to set their own mill rates. And they've broken that promise. You know, that was 12 years ago, and we have the receipts are in, folks. They have broken that promise to the students and teachers of Saskatchewan. We think that the best way is to reverse those Sask party cuts, to get those funds back to flow through local divisions, but to ensure that there's also teacher voice at the table. Teachers have an important role to play in identifying where those supports are needed so that they can be in place where the kids are at.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the same question in terms of should we have ratios? Should we be reporting targets and wait times for those professional supports, for specialists? Basically, how are you tackling class size and complexity? And our next speaker will be Philip Zajac from the Buffalo Party.
Okay, once again, I know that class size is a huge factor in children's education. As a sociologist, I've studied children and behaviors in university, and I think that when you start to have too large a classrooms, kids fall between the cracks, and they can't get the help that they need. So the NDP has had a long time to ensure that the Sask Party was doing what they need to be doing, and they haven't done that. The Buffalo Party would work with schools, because every school is unique. So we would have an advocate from each school who would advocate to the government, to the Ministry of Education, and talk to us about what the problem is for their particular school. When we release funding to those schools, we would ensure that that funding is being used what it was meant for by holding local schools and the administration accountable for what they use the funds with. It's important that each school has an advocate that presents to the government what they need. If we don't know what they need for their particular school, we're not able to fix it. So we would have a quarterly review after we funded those schools to make sure that the money is being used where it was meant to go. And then the specialists, psychologists, counselors play a huge part in the children's futures and helping them decide what they would like to do as they graduate from school. Teacher counselors help you pick universities. They help you pick a career path. They're essential to the future of Saskatchewan, and we need to have more. The numbers that we are seeing here are outrageous, and they got to be better.
Oh, just one question for you, Philip. Where do school boards then fit in terms of if each school has somebody talking to the province? That's a lot of schools. What's the role of school boards in this for you?
Well, school boards work as administrators too, right, for the local school. But we've been seeing that mismanagement of that money and allocation of resources hasn't been going very well. So again, there has to be accountability in government at every level. And it doesn't matter whether it's school board is being held accountable. The money is coming from our taxpayer dollars. We pay for that education. We tell them how it wants to be spent and where it needs to be spent. And that's why it's so important to vote in your school board elections and your municipal elections as well, so you know that the people who are representing you are going to represent your values and your values for the education system.
All right. Thank you, Philip. All right. The same question in terms of tackling class size and complexity. I know, Jeremy Cockrill, you've heard quite a lot about this over the past year that you've been our education minister. But in terms of going forward and restoring those resources by 2028, how do you ensure that the money that your government sets aside for K-12 education actually gets to the students who need it? And how do you do that by taking each community's needs into account?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That's a really good question. That's quite a challenging question, I think, when you're in the role of trying to figure out what the best way forward is. I mean, I think everybody on this call can agree that communities are unique. I think about a couple of schools that I was in recently, Mount Royal on the west side of Saskatoon, and then Carrot River High School out on the east side of our province. The reality is those are two vastly different communities and schools. And so I just think as Saskatchewan residents, we should be cautious around, moving towards any sort of ratios that are province-wide. Now, that being said, there's challenges out there, right? We've talked about that over the last year. We've heard directly from teachers on that. In the last budget, we responded with a 15% increase to supports for learning dollars. And, I think, so to answer the question on how we go forward and improve where we're at with this, it's interesting because as part of the bargaining process, one of the topics that was discussed was an accountability framework. And really where that came out of was a conversation that Ms. Beacott and I had directly and saying, how do we make sure that, okay, increase dollars to school divisions, but that teachers have a voice in how those dollars are spent. And I think, where I hope that we can get to with that accountability framework is that there's true teacher voice in terms of providing feedback to divisions and providing input on how those dollars get distributed to schools in those respective school divisions all over the province. Now, and it's also important to note that a lot of the specialist supports they don't just happen in the school, right? They happen in the community through the healthcare system and through various community-based organizations. And I do think there'd be an opportunity in most communities around the province to develop better coordination, again, between health and education and some of the CBO sectors that we have.
And there's a certain amount of coordination that, yes, can happen, but when you simply don't have the bodies there, like I'm just looking at the wait for a speech language pathologist assessment. If you look at the biggest school division in the province here in Saskatoon Public, it's 86 school days. That's when you're supposed to be learning how to speak. That's when you're supposed to be doing the work. So looking at that, we are short on the professionals. We have lost professionals. We have gained students. And I appreciate that your government is trying to find ways to find the money. But I mean, in a typical classroom, whether it's Mount Royal or Carrot River, how many students is too many?
Well, again, I've said before, I mean, that this is up to local school divisions to determine what is going to make sense. And you know, we've heard time and time again that people want those decisions to be made locally. You know, going back to speech paths for a second, I do think, you know, we've seen some success in the healthcare side with some of the recruitment incentives that have been in place over the last couple of years. I think there'd be an opportunity to go down that road potentially with some of the professions that support our students, and hopefully we would see some similar success in those areas.
Okay, I that is an answer. It's just, it's really hard to sort of conceptualize how it would work when there is just not money to hire the professionals right now. That said, I appreciate what you've brought here. Thank you. I think we should probably move on, because related to class size and complexity, having enough EAs tracking students, this is where we get to the growing issue of classroom violence.
Pardon me, Jennifer.
Oh, I'm sorry. We will come back to that. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to step all over your answer, Jahangir.
No, it's absolutely okay.
They kind of relate to each other, but if you can tackle that question, how do we make sure the dollars actually get to our students? The dollars that we say we're going to spend right now, some would argue they're not enough. Some would argue they are. Go ahead.
I think that's a fair question. And I mean, from our perspective, class size is the first step. Ensure if you cap the class sizes, we propose 22 max and an average of 18, it makes sure that any problems can be identified quickly. Once you quickly identify it, then ensuring that schools have the supports they need within them, including at least one mental health worker and one social worker. From there, you know, they might need to go outside to the community for more specialized help if it's required. But I think, you know, if you're looking at for how to ensure that complexity is addressed, the first step is ensuring class size is not overburdened.
And did I hear you correctly? You said one mental health worker and one social worker for each school, or shared between schools?
So it would be per school in urban settings, and we would advocate for at least one in every 2 schools in rural settings.
Okay. All right, that's something to chew on. Thank you so much for that, Jahangir. All right, this is sort of the next section I'd like to take a look at. It's the violence, the harassment that teachers are seeing in their classrooms. Sometimes it's student versus student. There's a number of teachers who, like 35% of the respondents in a survey of Saskatchewan teachers last year said, yes, I've experienced violence at me in my classroom. And this is certainly on the increase. It's up just about 30% from where we were even just 3 years ago. So looking at that, I guess my main question to you is, given that we are seeing increasing, like, literal violence in our classrooms, threats, physical force, if your party forms government, what are you going to do to tackle this issue? And just making sure that I keep everyone straight, we are going to start with Rose, followed by Matt, Philip, Jeremy, Jahangir, and finishing with Valerie on this question. So Rose, you're up. In terms of tackling violence and aggression in our schools, especially what teachers are seeing and reporting, the increase we've really seen over the last couple of years, what would you do?
Let's try that again. It is a shame that one of the most noble professions that you can ever have is that of an educator has turned into one of the most dangerous professions that you could possibly get in this province. 30% increase in a couple years is absolutely crazy. It never should be. This year, at the start of the school year, we have seen 2 major incidences, bear macing in Regina, and then the incident at Evan Hardy. Regarding that incident at Evan Hardy, all we get now is, well, it could have been worse. How much worse do you need it to be? How much worse do you need it to be before you acknowledge there's a problem, before you acknowledge that you created the problem? In order to stop this violence, we have to have the proper supports in place. We need to have the proper mental health supports. We need to address classroom size and complexity. These are all things that have to be in place in order to address this issue before something even more heinous happens than what happened second year of the school year. To me, I know people that are going into education, and while I applaud them for what they're doing, because it takes a very special type of person to do it, something I personally couldn't do, I don't have the patience for it. So it takes a very special person to be an educator. At the same time, I fear for their safety. I truly do. They need the supports in place to make sure this doesn't happen. They need the support from a government to recognize, hey, we've made a mistake, and now we need to correct this, and not take the stance of, yeah, it could have been worse.
Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think those 2 incidents are definitely top of mind for a lot of parents looking at sending their kids to school. Our next speaker, if I just need to make sure I'm abiding by my list properly, Matt Love from the NDP. What would you do if your party forms government? What would you do to address this issue?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I find myself agreeing with a lot of what Rose said, that violence in the classroom is very much interconnected to the other things we've talked tonight about restoring per student funding, looking at what kind of supports are needed in each school, in each community. We know that we have increasing needs in our schools. We know that teachers are at a breaking point, right? When they have more students requiring intensive support needs, more students who are new to the English language, more students who need access to mental health supports. They're not getting this at school, and teachers are going above and beyond every day. Our teachers in Saskatchewan are amazing. And when you add violence into that equation, we have a work environment that is not good for teaching. Teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions. We know that to be true. So we need to ensure that violence in the classroom is being tracked, it's being monitored. We need to understand the problem so that we can address it with a provincial strategy. We need to be able to work with our partners in education, including local boards and including teachers through the Federation and through our locals. But we can't address that problem if we're not really understanding it and tracking it. And that hasn't been done in Saskatchewan up to this point. And I think that's a terrible thing. I want to just express, I'm appalled to hear the stories I hear on the doorstep from educators, the violent acts that they've experienced and witnessed in our schools, including what took place here in my community at Evan Hardy. My thoughts go out to the staff there, the students who are impacted. It's a terrible thing. It shouldn't be part of anyone's educational experience. But we know that there's a lot of work to do in this province to ensure that things like that never happen again.
All right. And so that I'm clear, Matt, I know that you were talking about making sure that we track and that we monitor incidents of violence in schools. I know one of the asks that the teachers had this spring in bargaining was, hey, let's introduce measures to create maybe a confidential provincial reporting mechanism. Is that something you would support?
Yeah, I think what I'm talking about, Jen, and the short answer is yes, is we need to ensure that we understand the problem and then develop a strategy to address it. If we don't understand, if we don't have a way for those to be confidentially reported as teachers are proposing, how can we address this problem? We've had a government turning a blind eye to this and many other problems in education for a long time. So yes, we would support that process.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. All right, this is the question about if your party forms government, if it holds the balance of power, what do you do to tackle the issue of violence in the classroom? And just so many more teachers starting to report incidents of violence. It's almost all student related. What would you do about it? So Philip Zajac from the Buffalo Party is up next.
This, to me, is a very serious issue. I don't think that tracking violence and understanding violence in the school is the number one priority. The Buffalo Party would ensure that we would work to a model of zero violence in school. There is no reason why any student or teacher should fear violence when they come to a place of education. I work in a bank. If I have a bad day or I have a bad customer, I can't punch them in the face. It's unacceptable. The same mentality should occur at our schools. There's a very simple way to do it. Kids are smart. When they come to school, every child is going to sign a very simple contract that they understand, and it's all this is going to say. Violence is zero tolerance at this education facility. If you do violence to a teacher or a student, you will be expelled. And word will travel quickly. There has to be a rule, and it has to be enforced. If you have rules that are not enforceable, it's a moot point. A student and a teacher should never be afraid in school. You have a problem, you want to be physically violent, leave the school, go somewhere else. It's a model that's working in the US, and we can duplicate it here. No teacher should ever be afraid of a child putting their hands on them. It's disgusting and it's embarrassing. We are not those kind of people, and it's got to end in Saskatchewan. The Buffalo Party will work to make sure that there is zero tolerance for any type of bullying in school.
And I think most schools would already say we have as close to zero tolerance as we can. We also have some children with very complex needs who might not even understand what you're asking them to sign. It really depends on where they're coming in at. What do you do after you've banished a child from both school divisions that are available to them easily?
Well, here's the thing too. Word travels quickly, right? When you actually start to enforce the rules that you've established, and I think by signing a very simple contract, it's not 50 pages. It's just going to say, I understand that I cannot punch a teacher and I cannot harm another child. It's pretty simple, right? Okay. It's not legal dialogue, and they understand there's a consequence. If you punch someone, you will get expelled. Okay. And the other thing that I think this will do, it'll have parents engaging their children again, because they're going to tell their kids, you go to school today, don't be a bully because you'll get kicked out. Be a good student, pay attention, walk the straight line, do not fight anybody, and come home. Because when parents start getting re-involved in the education with their kids again, it makes a huge difference. That's our thought.
Thank you for that, Philip. That is Philip Zajac. He's with the Buffalo Party. And on the same question, exactly how do you address the really sharp increase we've seen in violent incidents in our schools? We're going to go to Jeremy Cockrill from the Saskatchewan Party. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jennifer. And, again, something that I think every party on the call can agree on. I mean, violence in any workplace is just not acceptable, right? And when we all have friends and family who work as educators or other professionals within the education system across the province. And we want them to be safe when they go to work. And for our kids too, we want them to be safe at school and make sure that they can focus on their education. I'd say that, throughout the bargaining process over the last year, I mean, our government's open to the reporting mechanism around violence in schools, and making sure that that's something that can be tracked. And, but I do think, there's going to be some more steps after, a reporting mechanism is in place. And, so to get a little bit more concrete on that, I think we'd have to look at some potential amendments to the Education Act in terms of, enabling school divisions to have a larger role, administrators to have a larger role than they do now in terms of dealing with violent incidents. When you go back, you mentioned kind of in your follow-up question to Philip, that we have students in our system that may not fully understand some of those dynamics. And that's where, going back to the specialized support classroom pilot that I talked about earlier, we have that in 8 schools right now, looking to see how we might expand that to more schools. Those pilot projects that I visited, I think we're already seeing some improvements in those specific schools around that. And so again, how do we improve the role of administrators and school divisions to address violent incidents? Support students that have behavioral challenges. And then I think the other piece too is, schools that have school resource officer programs, that's showing to be successful. And so we should continue looking at that and working with school divisions and local police departments and the RCMP to see how we expand that to more schools where needed. Not needed in every school, but where needed, I think there'd be an opportunity there.
And just as a follow-up, I think a number of teachers would say the lack of having enough adults sometimes in the room is really what's driving some of these increases in violence. You just can't get between kids quite fast enough. Sometimes if they're bent and determined on doing something, what do you do with that child? Like, are you suggesting that we should be streaming them into these 8 pilot project schools? Should they be attending those? What do we do with those kids?
I'm suggesting with the 8 pilot programs is I think we're starting to address some of the root challenges that end up in violent situations, right? And I think that's really, I think that gives me hope, and I hope it would give educators around the province hope that, again, starting to try something different at early years is hopefully starting to work upstream and address some of the root causes earlier and earlier.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy. All right, we would like to hear now from Jahangir Valiani from the Progress Party. And I know even earlier today during this forum, Jahangir, you mentioned that your kids had the lockdown drill today. When you look at what they tell you about schools, and what you're hearing and what other families are experiencing in terms of the violence we see, what would you do to address this?
Well, yeah, and it was kind of emotional because, as I said, and maybe it's a sign of how old I am, I did not something I had to deal with when I was growing, when I was young and going in school. From my perspective, violence seems to be a symptom because it's not only happening at schools. It's happening on transit. It's happening at libraries. I mean, if you look at a public space, it seems to be just increasing. To the extent that we need more staff, better ratios, we support that, more educational assistance, we support that to ensure that, if for children with special needs, or if that's the issue, it's identified. But this rate of increase is not a sudden jump in students who are or individuals who require additional support. The question, so then what's the broader question? Why do we have people acting in an unacceptable manner in public spaces in generally? And that is a more complex question and more complex. But I do think schools have a role in it. If we're saying that there's a chance that we're losing respect for one another through a variety of algorithms influencing what people see and things like that, then schools can have a very important role in ensuring that young people can celebrate and thrive in diverse environments, to respect difference. And, that might require thinking at a curriculum level, and it will require leadership from a provincial level to ensure that promotion of diversity and promotion of all minority groups, to feel that Saskatchewan is a place where all people are respected, isn't there?
Thank you, Jahangir. That is Jahangir Valiani from the Progress Party here in Saskatchewan, bringing the question of how you would tackle violence in the classroom, what you would do about it. Let's go now to Valerie from the Green Party. Go ahead, Valerie.
As I was listening to all the panelists, it's very obvious that no one has a real clear answer to how to address this. What I think, and Jahangir, did I pronounce your name right? I'm sorry. Anyway, he got closest to the issue in regards to what is the root cause? Where is this violence coming from? Is it coming from anxiety? Is it coming from depression? Is it coming from a medical condition? Is it coming from, like, what's happening? Why are we not meeting the needs of our kids in our buildings in order for them to feel safe and confident and well-adjusted, and able to be themselves, without fear of being picked on or violence? Okay, so if we kind of tackle that question a little bit, like, where is this coming from? I think what I feel and what the Saskatchewan Green Party, talks about a lot is this industrial model of education that we've been working on for the past 150 years has some real devastating roots to it. that I believe needs to change. So we need to look at some of the colonial structures. We need to look at some of the lack of diverse ways of doing things and different ways of doing things. We need to bring in, models that support, the social, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being of children. So that's what I'd like to do.
Hey, Valerie, can you think of like one concrete example where that would apply?
In what would apply?
Just in terms of, I mean, for a lot of people, as soon as you say colonialism, they're like, whoosh, whoa, okay, now what do we need? But in terms of getting to those root causes, can you think of a concrete example that would help illustrate the kind of solution you're proposing?
Right. So the highly structured nature of our buildings right now, with bells, classes, times, things like that, sometimes that just is not what kids need. So schools that are working with land-based programs, with alternate programs, with alternative ways of learning and being and doing, those are the ones that are going to have a decrease in violence in the classrooms, is what I think.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. That is Valerie Brooks. She is with the Green Party of Saskatchewan. And this actually kind of brings us into the next question that I wanted to put to each of you candidates. And as people were registering to be part of watching this on YouTube tonight, teachers, retired teachers, those studying to become teachers, everyone was invited to submit questions. And a lot of those we tried to compile into the questions I've already thrown at you tonight. But there was also a lot of questions, like looking at it, we had quite a number of questions on the issue of funding for registered independent schools, qualified independent schools, for what we will effectively call private schools. So when I'm talking about public schools, I'm talking about the Catholic school division, as well as public school divisions across the province. When I'm talking about independent or private schools, those are the ones that are a little bit more off the beaten track. Harvest City Christian Academy in Regina, here in Saskatoon, Legacy Christian Academy. We want to know your position in terms of public funds going to these private schools. Often they are sometimes religiously affiliated, not all the time. But we'd like to know, in terms of the money that we see going to these, from 2020's budget, the money going to independent and private schools has increased by 79%. Funding to public schools over that same time period, it's increased 13%. So the question is, in terms of all our taxpayers' dollars, how many of them should be going to private and home schools? And in the rotation tonight, we are going to start with Matt Love from the NDP. What's your position on this and on finding these private and independent schools that are outside the public school system?
Yes, this has been a big discussion in our province over the last number of years, as these allegations of abuse, many criminal charges have come forward, allegations of financial problems, all sorts of questions about this category of schools that have been created by the Sask Party to truly be independent of government oversight, public oversight, independent of the FOI process, independent of financial audits, independent of many of the regulations that we have in our publicly funded public and Catholic and Franciscan schools, including having professional educators staffing those schools, which doesn't exist in many of these independent schools. Now, we also have to be clear that there are many categories of private schools, and so it can be quite complicated. We have 4 historical high schools. They've been around for longer than Saskatchewan's been a province. There's never going to be more than 4. We have associate schools who have accountability within divisions. And then we have other categories of schools that have really been created to get massive amounts of public dollars. And it's been the position of the Sask Party government to see that category of schools expand and grow and flourish. It's been their stated goal, and they use very American-style, Republican-style talking points about parental choice in education. Well, most parents in this province don't have choice. There's one school in their community. Our priority will be to fund those schools. We'll increase funding for public, Catholic, and Franciscan schools to ensure that the majority of students are getting what they need when they attend school. And our position has always been that any school that gets even a single dollar of public funds needs to ensure that they're abiding by the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code, and that they're not mistreating their students in ways that we've seen from several of these schools where allegations have come forward.
All right. And just to follow up, Matt, in terms of the money that's already going to private and independent schools, would you maintain those levels or would you cut it back?
We're going to have to review that. And the shortest answer that I can give you is that I think that that's something that can be reviewed, but there's so many categories of schools. I can't give you one answer tonight and say, oh, that all needs to be cut back or it all needs to stay the same. There's a lot of different categories. And in fact, they created a new category just 2 years ago of certified independent schools. So I think that there's lots there that we need to look at. But again, our priority and our commitments are to funding publicly funded, publicly delivered schools, and to not do what the minister and his party have done here, which is divert funds into these independent schools.
Thank you. All right, we'll put the same question, your position on public funds going to private and independent, etc. schools. Philip Zajac is with the Buffalo Party. Go ahead, Philip.
Hi. Well, education, I think, is important. I don't think it is the role of the government to dictate where a parent wants their kid to go to school. So the Buffalo Party is a true believer in not being a father figure to families in this province. I think that funding should be fair across the board and equitable. So, and again, the NDP education minister, or not minister, but the shadow. There's all kinds of incidents in schools, whether it's public or private, where things have happened, and to simply pick one out or two of is misrepresentative, right? There's problems in all school systems, and it's not just in Saskatchewan; it's all over the world. So I guess bottom line, education is important. If a parent chooses to send their kid to a private school or a Christian school, that's their choice. And if we help fund their education, I don't think anybody should have a problem with that. So that would be the Buffalo position.
Okay. So am I hearing you correctly in saying that you would maintain funding for the private and independent schools as is right now, or you'd increase it?
I don't think it needs to be increased. When we talk about a U.S. model for private schools, very few private schools in the U.S. get any government funding. It's all paid for by the individual parents. And you can move to that type of a model that if you want to enhance private schools for people who want to pay, that's a good system and it works. So again, this is a mold, and the best way to fix issues like this is to listen to everybody and come up with a solution.
But it's still everybody's tax dollars. Should everybody's tax dollars be funneled into independent and private schools?
Well, I don't. Okay, if Buffalo had a choice, you would be able to pick. So if you're going to look and say, okay, where do I want my education tax dollars to go? Which is a very easy thing to do. Do I want it to go to public? Do I want it to go to Catholic? Do I want it to go to Christian or private school? And check a box. And that way, the taxpayer is determining where those tax dollars go, not the government. And that's what democracy is about. It's your money. Tell us where you want it to go, and we will allocate that money that way.
All right. Thank you, Philip. All right. Our next candidate up is Jeremy Cockrill. And Jeremy, in terms of your position on public funds going to private and homeschools, clearly funding levels have gone up. I'm going to put the question to you. Should they stay at that level, or are there any situations in which you would pull funding from private and independent schools?
Thanks, Jennifer. So, certainly we believe that, every child should have access to safe and quality education here in the province, whether that's public or Catholic or Francophone education or independent schools. And so our party would continue to fund independent schools at the current rate. The reality is that we believe that, parents at the end of the day should have the choice of where their children go to school. And we allow that between public and Catholic schools. We allow that, whether, if you qualify for Francophone education. And so, certainly we would continue providing funding to independent schools because they do provide choice and options to parents. I think it's important to note, Jennifer, that, probably the largest driver of the increased overall dollars going to independent schools over the last several years is because more families are choosing these schools. And that's what's driven with higher enrollment going there. That's why more dollars have gone to those schools.
I think a number of people would say parents are choosing those schools because conditions have grown untenable in some cases in some of the most crowded public schools and Catholic schools that we have in our communities. I guess what I'm looking for here is, from the provincial government's perspective, why does attending public schools even matter? Like, I know that yes, parents can choose, but parents can also choose to pay to send their children to private and independent schools. Should everyone's tax dollars be going to those schools?
You know, keeping in mind that independent schools are not funded at nearly the level that public or Catholic schools are, or Francophone schools are in the province. You know, certainly as a government, you know, we're comfortable with the independent school funding as is. And as I said, we want to continue support parents and families in whatever decisions they make for their children.
And just to run by the numbers, certified independent schools right now receive 75% of what the per student would be at a regular public school. And a number of schools are receiving about 50% of the per student funding. So it's still fairly significant. Anyway.
Sorry, Jennifer, one thing quickly is just Harvest City Christian, also just important to note, that's an associate school under Regina Public School. So they do have accountability of the public division in Regina.
Is there anything you would do to enhance accountability from private and independent schools beyond what you've already done?
Yeah, you know, I think there'd be opportunities to enhance accountability. I mean, obviously, you know, any organization receiving taxpayer dollars, there should be a level of accountability. We've added that and added oversight to independent schools over the last several years as we have developed these tiers to make sure that there is a higher level of accountability if you're in the certified category. And, you know, there's a process for schools to enter the certified independent school category. And certainly we'll always be looking for ways to how we can strengthen that accountability.
In hindsight, would you have changed anything in the past year that you've been the education minister? Is there anything you would have done differently on that accountability piece?
You know, I think there's always, I think, you know, not on the certified independent schools. I think, again, it all comes back to making sure that we can support families in whatever choice they're making for their children on where they go to school. So, you know, certainly as we go forward, you know, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to ensure that that choice is available to parents in whatever community they live in, but also ensure that there is stronger accountability going forward.
All right, thank you. All right, Jahangir, it is your turn. Jahangir is with the Progress Party, and this is just in terms of funding for private and independent schools. Where do you see this?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the original philosophy and made it talked about in the opening statement, where it was, you know, the job of the provincial government. One of the most important jobs of the provincial government is fully funded public education, and that's in Saskatchewan, public, Catholic, and Francophone education. And I think it's entirely fair that the other candidates said that that parent choice is valuable, and if parents want to take that route, that is a decision they can make, but I don't believe that public tax dollars should be moved to that direction.
Okay, thank you. Short, to the point, I'm with you there. Valerie Brooks is with the Green Party. Go ahead, Valerie. What do you make of the tax dollars that come from all our pockets going to private and independent schools the way they are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Green Party would phase out all funding for private schools over the next 5 years. Of course, what we are looking for is a strong community. A strong community comes from a diverse and inclusive, welcoming environment. When we start segregating public funds into allowing, I'm okay with parents having choices. I fully agree that a parent should have a choice of where their kid goes to school, what their kid learns. I understand that. But public dollars, tax dollars in a public system needs to be allocated completely to fully public, accountable, transparent schools that are accessible to everyone. So,
thank you. That is Valerie Brooks running for the Greens, and we'd also like to open the floor to Rose Buscholl from the PCs. In terms of funding for our independent and private schools, should our tax dollars be going there? Go ahead, Rose.
Like I said in my opening statements, I think this answer is pretty simple. Public dollars fund public schools. It is that simple. Now, I've heard the mention of Catholic school boards. What a lot of people don't seem to realize is that when the Constitution was written, Catholic school boards were actually written in as part of the Constitution as being funded under public schools. And this was done even before Saskatchewan itself became a province. So this is something that's constitutionally protected. What I'm talking about is the independent certified schools. Absolutely not. I agree. Parents need to have the right to send their children to wherever they want. They have that right of choice. However, we're talking public tax dollars. Public tax dollars should not be going to pay for an independent school that will focus on areas that don't belong in public schools. We keep church and state separate for a reason. It should be out of the schools. And if they want to teach that, then maybe they should get funded by the church in which they represent.
All right. Thank you, Rose. That is Rose Buscholl. She's with the PC Party, the Progressive Conservative Party of Saskatchewan. And we're already at 20 minutes after 8 o'clock here in our forum. This is where we sort of ask you to sum it all up. We give each candidate 1 minute just to go through any closing thoughts they have. You can respond to other things you've heard. Each of you will have 1 minute to do this. And I'm going to be starting with Philip Zajac from the Buffalo Party. Go ahead, Philip. The floor is yours for 1 minute.
Well, thank you for that. Again, I want to thank you to the panel for being here tonight, and thank you for hosting. You've done a fantastic job. One thing that I want to mention that concerns me out of this, all of this dialogue, I am 100% sure that there's not one teacher that feels more confident about safety in schools, knowing the fact that all we're going to do is track the violence. That solves nothing. That does not make me feel better about sending my kid to school, or a teacher who's going to work tomorrow. They might have the same thing happen day in and day out. Tracking the problem is not a solution. Stopping the problem and enforcing the rules will do it. The Buffalo Party will ensure that education is a priority in this province. We will make sure that money is spent where it needs to be spent. We will hold school boards accountable for what they're going to use that money for. And a Buffalo Voice is a vote of confidence in the legislature every day. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the opportunity. And vote Buffalo in 2024.
All right. That's Philip Zajac running for the Buffalo Party in this election. Again, going to Jeremy Cockrill from the Saskatchewan Party for a 1 minute closing statement on public education.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you to all the other candidates again for joining us, and thank you to the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation for hosting this important dialogue tonight. I can tell you that myself and all the other Saskatchewan Party candidates right across the province are focused on continuing to grow our economy so that we can invest more in public services like education. And I certainly hope that I have the opportunity to work with the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation and all of its members on these important issues as we go forward and try and make this province an even better place for our kids and grandkids. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Jeremy Cockrill running for the Saskatchewan Party out of North Battleford. Our next candidate is Jahangir Valiani from the Saskatchewan Progress Party. Go ahead with your closing remarks, Jahangir.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watching, who's managed to stay for an hour and 20 minutes of this. But so the Saskatchewan Progress Party, we're small. We may not have a candidate in every riding, but where we do, a vote for this Progress Party will be a vote to support our educators. As it stands, it could be a close election, but with Saskatchewan Progress Party members in the legislature can ensure that the government commits to a stronger, better funded public education system. Thanks.
Thank you, Jahangir. All right, we are moving now to Valerie Brooks, running for the Green Party. Go ahead, Valerie. Here's your closing statement.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone watching. Thanks to panelists and you, Jennifer, for moderating. So the Greens believe wholeheartedly in a whole child development system that takes into consideration social, emotional, psychological literacy. We believe that public education is the best place for this to happen. As I've stated earlier, it's where the most diverse views on things can be explored, and public education is so important to fund our economy in the future. If we don't fund our public education, we will not be funding a strong economy. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. Thank you very much, Valerie Brooks with the Green Party of Saskatchewan. Moving now to Rose Buscholl with the Progressive Conservative Party.
Well, thank you for having us all here tonight. This has been a great opportunity for everyone. And I guess I can close by saying public education is very important, and it's something that we need to plan for. There's an old saying that I went through when I was in cadets many years ago, was that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And right now, with the current state we're at, we're planning to fail because there's not enough attention put into public education. And this is something that we need to put on the forefront instead of using it as a political battleground, which it has been done for many years already.
All right. Thank you, Rose. That's Rose Buscholl. She's running for the Progressive Conservative Party of Saskatchewan. Closing statements now from Matt Love with the NDP.
Thanks, Jen. You know, what I've heard from the Saskatchewan Party tonight is that they're planning for more of the same. Well, after 6 years of Scott Moe as the premier, he's led us to last place in education, last place in healthcare, and second to last place in economic growth. Folks, it's time for change. We can do better. To the teachers on the call tonight, I want to say that your advocacy is working. When I'm on the doorstep, I'm meeting people who have heard from a teacher. Maybe it's their neighbor or their friend or their family member. And your advocacy is working because they're telling me that it's time for change in this province because they want to see our education system get out of last place. We need your help. We need teachers getting involved. Keep talking to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family. Get involved in a local campaign. If anybody wants to know how to do that, contact me and I can help you make those connections. We need to bring change that our teachers and our students get the supports that they need to succeed at school and beyond. And the Saskatchewan NDP and our leader, Carla Beck, are here to deliver that change.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our election forum. Thank you to all the candidates who were here. Thank you to everyone who's been tuning in on YouTube and who contributed some really great questions and food for thought for us. It is worth talking about public education and talking with your neighbors, talking about, okay, what do schools look like now? What do we want them to be? And thank you to all the people who are putting their names forward saying, yes, I would like to serve the public. I would like to make our public schools better. Thank you to all of you. And I'm going to pass the mic on now to Samantha Beacott, the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for leading us through the candidate forum tonight. I can't count the number of messages that I've seen praising the work that you did. I think it was wonderful leading us through good conversation, points from all of the candidates, and definitely giving us a lot to think about. As I mentioned earlier, the STF is a nonpartisan organization, and we won't be endorsing any party or candidate. Rather, our aim is to educate and encourage voters and candidates to consider students' needs and the future of Saskatchewan and the state of public education in this election in October. This year, we're introducing a candidate pledge card. And so thanks, Jay, for sharing that for us. We're sending them to candidates either by mail or by email and asking them to commit to advocating for public education in Saskatchewan and ensuring that students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in our classrooms. Once candidates sign the card, they can take a photo with it, tag us on social media, and we'll share those who take the pledge. So with 6 candidates here already tonight, I'm going to invite you to be the first to take this pledge. So again, I'm going to go through in alphabetical order and ask each of you whether you're going to or whether you're willing to take the pledge with us. So Valerie, do you pledge to advocate for public education in Saskatchewan and ensure our students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in the classroom?
You betcha, for sure.
Thank you. Rose, do you take the pledge to advocate for public education in Saskatchewan and ensure our students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in our classrooms?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Jeremy, do you pledge to advocate for public education in Saskatchewan and ensure our students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in the classroom?
I do. Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you. Matt, do you pledge to advocate for public education in Saskatchewan and ensure our students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in their classrooms?
Sure do. Every day, Samantha.
Thank you. Jahangir, do you pledge to advocate for public education in Saskatchewan and ensure our students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in the classroom?
I absolutely do.
Thank you. I thought we lost you for a second. Philip, do you pledge to advocate for public education in Saskatchewan and ensure our students and teachers get the support they need to succeed in the classroom?
I do.
Thank you to all 6 of you for taking the pledge and committing to advocating and taking action to support public education here. We've been talking a lot tonight about the importance of education at the provincial level, but we know there's more to it than that. Next month, on November 13th, there will be local elections across the province where we will vote for trustees in public and separate school systems. Trustees play an important role in establishing a school division's priorities, vision, educational plan, and annual budget. They are locally elected officials, so they are accountable to their communities and divisions. And in 2020, nearly 60% of trustee seats were uncontested. So we know the representation of trustees is important, and we know the democratic process is important. So we encourage lots of people to get involved and put their names forward. We have some resources for potential trustees on our website, which we encourage you to check out, as well as the Saskatchewan School Boards Association website. Community members are important to ensure our kids get the best education possible. So please take the time to learn about who is running in your community and what they can offer as a trustee. I want to again share my thanks to all 6 of the candidates for participating tonight. And thank you to all of the teachers, superannuated teachers, and our teacher students who tuned in and submitted questions prior to our event. If you missed part of the forum, it will be available on the STF YouTube channel tomorrow. And don't forget to ask the candidates in your area if they've signed their pledge card for education. Have a great night, everyone.
I think we're all done.
Thanks.
Hey, we
We
did
can
it,
do it.
everyone. Right on. Yeah.